Good afternoon, Charlie Smith, aka Shockbytes here. How are you today? Um, like the description says, I just want to go over a few things that are not pretty much no longer taught in schools. I don't even believe that they have a reasonable overview. And looking at the results of today and what I see in the U.S. Congress, um, things have gone vastly awry. Okay, so and I've got all this written down because I tend to bounce around a lot. So hopefully this will keep me on point a little bit better. This country was established under two philosophies. One, Judeo-Christian morals and ethics. Two, John Locke liberalism, also known as limited and restricted, that's important, government. Um, Understand this, we are not a democracy. We are a democratically elected representative constitutional republic form of government. Um, this is why we have private property. This is why we have power established from we the people, you and me, Joe Blow, uh, and not from the top down. Rather, we don't have a monarchy. And there's only really two forms of government. You can call it socialism, you can call it communism, whatever you want to call it. It is all monarchy based. All the power resides at the top, and everybody else is a serf that we may or may not give certain privileges to. With the constitutional republic, the binding is on the representative government, not on us from whom the power actually comes. Um, we have we have rights established from our Creator, okay, not privileges granted by the government. Statism is the exact opposite of this. What I was just talking about previously is everything is granted to you from the powers that be, the government. Um, Now, under a constitutional republic, these rights cannot, under any circumstances, mind you, there are a couple select ones say you're in prison, you probably shouldn't have the right to carry a gun. I mean, yeah, it is what it is. Uh, be repressed or infringed upon. And this goes into the judicial system, right? So, and this all revolves around three co equal branches of government. You have the judicial, which interprets, uh, well, okay, let me come to judicial last. Okay, I think that's probably the easiest way to do that. Let's go with the legislative. Legislative is their job is to make law, right? Not suggestions, law. And this undergoes a process of submitting bills and ideally balancing those bills against the baseline of the Constitution, making sure that it does not infringe upon any of said rights. And that's a big thing because what we see currently is we see a lot of the Constitution being balanced against, bills being submitted. That's the wrong way to go about things. It literally defies uh, the whole constitutional republic. Um, and Another thing that I see going on a lot is where you're granted power or authority. Well, authority. Let's say authority because that there's a difference. Where you're granted authority to do something doesn't mean you should do it. And what we see here is a lot of the people of the legislative branches, both the Senate, where there are two representatives from each state, and the House of Representatives, where the amount of representatives based on population X, uh, which is currently 435. So we have 535 sitting members of Congress. Um, because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And I think, like voting yourself a raise, how's that? I don't recall that being submitted to the people for a vote because I can assure you that most people I know would have voted they take about a 75% decrease in pay. Sure as hell not an increase. Pardon my French. Um, and so what they do is they create law. Now, what they can also do is they can rescind law, and I'm not using the right term there. It'll come to me at some point down the road. But they can take old laws that have been written and say, you know what, we're doing away with that. That's just silly. That goes against the Constitution, both in word and concept. So they can do that as well. They can go in and rescind taxes. They can go in and rescind regulation. And we recently had a certain president that some people kind of go crazy about, who's famous for deregulation, did wonderful things for the country. So where we are now is, what I think is that we are at the point that we were at, and so let's call it 1775 or so. Now, there are probably the two most important founding documents, although there are several that could be labeled as founding documents. You have the Declaration of Independence, and you also have the Constitution, and included with that is the Bill of Rights. And I think that my opinion is that some people regard the Bill of Rights as amendments. That is not true. The Bill of Rights is an established set of rights that cannot be infringed upon. And literally, there is something called the Supremacy Clause in the Constitution. It says anything that goes against any of this, it ain't valid, Chief. Sorry. So let me read a little bit of the Declaration of Independence for you. So, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitled them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, government are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That's important. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem the most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly to all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to render them under absolute despotism, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. And here we're going to go over a list of things you see happening today in this country. He has refused to assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the rights of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has backroom talks with him until it browbeats him into doing what he wants to do. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers incapable of annihilation have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. I don't think we're there quite yet, not too far. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. Well, Lord forbid, somebody actually be held accountable for what they did. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. These would be the alphabet groups, or the FBI, CIA, NSA, pick it, man, IRS, swarms. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures, DHS, local FBI offices. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power, martial law. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. Sound familiar? For quartering large bodies of armed troops among us. Now, the Constitution goes on to directly address some of these things, this being one of them. For protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states. Sherman was notorious for this. For cutting off our trade with all parts of the world. Sound familiar? For imposing taxes on us without our consent. Yeah. For depriving us, in many cases, of the benefits of trial by a jury. For transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses. For abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into the colonies. For taking away our charters, is abolishing our most valuable laws and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments. And this goes to all kinds of things, what establishes local community, culture, language, like I say, hey, y'all, back yonder, things like that, and a lot more. He has advocated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coast, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. And this is where we go into the overreach. And I completely understand the strategic importance of cutting off supply lines, things like that. But there were a few generals that went way the heck overboard. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy, scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by our hands. Overseas undeclared wars, anybody? He has excited domestic insurrections among us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our foreigners the mercy. Okay, start over this sentence. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. It kind of sounds like what we did to the Native Americans, just telling you the truth. In every stage of these operations, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be a ruler of a free people. Our Constitution actually guarantees us the right of redress against our government for uh, for wrongs committed against us. And you can see this being manipulated a lot when you have government mandates like vax mandates. Uh, oh, by the way, we're going to give them a free pass. Really? Oh, wait, the mask mandates. Yeah, well, it doesn't work. It's kind of like me throwing a slider in my room and expecting to hit one of the walls without doing it on purpose. Absolutely insane. It doesn't work and causes massive, massive psychological damage to kids. It Wow. Okay, so they can't read faces, they can't read expression. It affects their speech. It has nothing but negative effects and is zero effect. In World War One, mustard gas was a big thing, and hundreds of thousands of people died. About 18,000 people died from the mustard gas. The rest of them were killed from bronchial pneumonia caused by the masks. Um, so good job. It, Nor have we been wanting in attention to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. Good gracious. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. So what they're saying here is, and I think it was Churchill who put it best: we are common people separated by a common language, and at the end of the day, we're going to have our tiffs. Now, this is kind of a bloody one, but get the fight done, get it over with, and never forget to be civilized at the end of it. We do a lot of things as men and women in uniform, following orders, which I'll get to that at some point in time. We don't want to go down that rabbit hole today. But when the documents are signed, that's supposed to be it. And I know, as you know, that just turning off that switch isn't that easy. There will be hard feelings. But at the end of the day, you have to be able to rely upon your humanity to forego and to forgive. And I can't imagine the enmity between people, next door neighbors. There were fathers fighting against their sons. There were brothers fighting against their brothers in the war between the states. And some of those families never made up. Some of them never came back together. Some of them did, but wow, that's got to be tough. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Signed by order and behalf of the Congress, John Hancock, President. Attest, Charles Thompson, Secretary. Now, to me, and to, I don't know what the percentage of people who've ever, picked up a weapon, put on the uniform, been willing to lay down their life. But the people like us, those hold very special meaning. And we get it. And we get it at a level that most do not. But, and part of this was from having family that has fought in every declared war in this country since 1800s. And so that has a historic meaning to me personally. And then it has a meaning to me as a patriot, as somebody who actually holds these words near and dear to my heart. And the biggest thing that you get out of this, to me, is that men by the thousands, women and children, bled and died for this. So strong was their belief. And in this is very clearly established that if we want to keep this, we have a duty. So, all right, guys, I'm out of here. And I'll talk to you later. Y'all be good. Thank you.